All right, let's update where we load a tree from disk to make sure that the tree being loaded has the correct type. Let's do this over in utilities.h, over here. And we're gonna look for our load tree from disk, this function right here. Okay, so we're gonna update this to look for an identifier, if I can spell that right, type to load. Right, and we'll update this thing over here. Let's see, what's this called? Load tree from disk. That's here. All right, so we're gonna update this. All right, let's do this guy right here. This goes const identifier, type to load. And now we need to check if tree is valid and tree.getType equals type to load. Then this is good to go. All right, now let's build to find the errors and add the types that we're looking for. And while we're doing this, we will also clean up any checks. We should just need to check if it's valid and the version number is cool. So let's do our build and see what we get. All right, no matching function call for load tree from disk here at main. All right, this one right here. So we want to load identifiers. And we want the TaskQueue settings. We want to make sure that it's that kind. Let's expand this a bit. And now we want to check, if you remember that we stored the app version as an int, so it would be easy to compare. So let's check for that right now. So if settings is valid and settings has this property, well, before we do that, let's do, let's see, settings, and then we'll look for that identifier, identifiers, app version. We want to make sure it's greater than or equal to our project info version number, like that. And we need to cast this to an int. If this is cool, then we can check if the property exists. If settings has property. So cut, paste that right there. And now we can move this here. All right, there's another one over here. Settings, load tree from disk. We want our settings file, so it's gonna be the same identifiers, TaskQueue settings. And we can lose this jassert that the settings is valid because get property will return the default value we supply if the tree is invalid. But we should still check for the right version number, so we'll do that here. We'll just copy it from up here. Right here, we'll just grab this line and put that here. And we'll put each of these on their own line. There we go. All right, if settings app version is cool and it has this X property and it has this Y property, then we can do what we need to do. All right, let's build it again and look for the next error. All right, utilities.h, what do we got here? All right, create default tree. We want our settings file, so we're looking for settings, identifiers, TaskQueue settings. And we're gonna want to do our settings is valid and version number check. Do I have that copied? I do have that copied, awesome. So we can just go like that. All right, let's build again and look for the next one. Oh yes, I did spell that wrong. Fix, build. All right, let's go up here to TaskQueue container, load tree from disk. Okay, in our tree saver. So we want the same thing here. Identifiers, TaskQueue, identifiers, I keep spelling that wrong. TaskQueue settings. And we should add our check if the settings are valid and if they are of the right version before we try to set that property and resave it. So we'll do if settings.is valid and this thing. If that stuff's cool, then we can do this stuff here. So we'll get rid of that. I don't want to lose what I have copied, so we'll do it that way. Like that, and just re-indent. There we go. All right, what's the next one? What function is this? This is the new button on click. All right, so we just need to add our TaskQueue item. Our identifiers, TaskQueue settings, and we'll add our same check from before if settings.is valid and our version number is cool. Then we can do settings set property, save tree to disk, and then load tree. That's cool there. Let's go to the next one. Load button dot on click. So we're going to do auto tree, load tree from disk, identifiers. And for this one, we want it to be a regular TaskQueue tree, not a TaskQueue settings. All right, now we need to check if tree is valid. We'll do the same. We'll do the same thing here. Actually, we'll change this a little bit. Let's comment this out. We're going to comment this chunk out. Change this logic a little bit. All right, so we know that. Let's see. We can check for the tree. So we'll do if tree is valid, and our version number is cool. We'll start there. And we can do our same auto settings file equals get settings file. Auto settings. Basically, we can skip this check to see if the type is right because it's a different type now. We want this TaskQueue type right here instead of this guy. So we can do our auto settings equals get settings file. Settings file equals get settings file, and then auto settings equals get load tree from disk and settings file. And we want our identifiers TaskQueue settings. And now we can do our if settings.isValid, and our version number is cool in our settings. Oh, this needs to be tree, not setting. If our tree version number is cool, the tree that we loaded from disk. All right, so if our settings version is cool and our settings are valid, then we can update that property, settings.setProperty. We want to set our identifiers current file. We want to set that to our result.getFullPathName again, and our same null pointer. Basically this stuff all over again. So save tree to disk, settings, and it's going to go in our settings file. And now we can call load tree. Let's build and find the next error. All right, a little further down. All right, right here, let's see. We want our settings file, so we're going to do identifiers TaskQueue settings. Now if settings is valid, do the same check again. And now if settings has property, that's all fine and good. Let's see, where's the next one? Okay, what do we have down here? Reset tree root. All right, so we got to load this guy from here. This one we want identifiers. Remember, because this one we're actually loading a task list. Identifiers TaskQueue is the one that we want. And we want to make sure it's valid and that the version number is correct. So this needs to be VT. And let's build it again. Okay, and was this one cool? Yes, settings is valid and settings version number. Okay, cool. So we definitely need to refactor the loading settings safely and then doing something. And I would love to figure out how to do this to be more like that if pointer equals some way that you convert a pointer. Yeah, all right, so let's build this and run and see what happens. Okay, this opened fine, so that's cool. Let's close this and let's go to our text editor. Let's change the version number of our settings to be 1 lower than it is, and let's see what happens. Let's change that to be that. Save this and we'll run it and open it. All right, cool. Settings does not contain a valid value tree. All right, cool. So it's going to overwrite the settings from scratch. That goes that, there goes that. And if we look at it now, we can see our settings are back to what they were, and we don't have a file to load. Okay. So let's change the task file named in the settings current file property to have an incorrect version number. After this loads, we'll quit this and we'll run this out, we'll quit it, and then we'll change the task file. We'll do that next. Okay, so this is cool. Let's close that. Let's edit our task file. This guy right here, default.task. Let's change this to be 1 lower, changing our add version. Save and rerun. Okay, so what's it gonna do with that? Right, is that gonna do anything? Huh, so it didn't do what I thought it was gonna do. Okay, so I have an idea about how we can fix this, which is not terribly complicated, so I think it's worth spending the time to do it. And the idea is that we can just make this reset tree root function return true if it works. So where is that function? That's right here. So reset tree root bool, change it to that, and then that's down here, reset tree root bool. And we can just add a return true right here. And then this one can be return false. Now we can put this right here. And we can wrap this in parentheses and say, if you can't do this and you can't do this, then do this. Try to load the default tree. So we should say, if the file exists and you try to load it and loading fails, or if this is true, sorry, if this is false, it should actually be this logic. Right, if current file does not exist or we are unable to reset the tree root, try to load the default tree. All right, let's run this and see what it does. Hopefully this will throw some kind of message and then we'll get to this point. Okay, so we're in here. It does not contain a valid value tree, so let's step out. That returned false. So now it's going to try to load the default tree. Try to load default tree, current file doesn't exist. So we'll do this, create tree, and now load tree. Ta-da. All right, awesome. That worked as expected. So let's do that one more time. Go to this file, change the file number, change that to 5, save, and reopen, and it should overwrite that. All right, so you just press play a bunch of times. And now let's look at our file right here, and it's back the way it was. Okay, perfect. So that's the solution right there. That handles that guy. Now I'm going to leave it as an exercise for the viewer to figure out some way to recover the user's saved settings, such as window position or the open files, when you're opening an outdated settings file, or if you convert a user's task file to the correct format for a more recent app version, assuming that the format changes. And the reason that you might find yourself in this situation, just imagine if you have created an app, users have created some data, and then you push out an update for the app and you bump the version number and you have all these checks to see what it does. The users are going to want to be able to continue using their previous versions of their stuff, and it's your job as the programmer to figure out how to bump this, how to load their old versions and resave them as the new versions. I don't know if you've ever used programs where they're like, if you open previous versions of, or if you open documents created in previous versions, you will no longer be able to open that document in the previous version of this app. It's that kind of situation. So anyway, that's what that is. So for right now, since we're just working out how to load these files from disk and how to handle checking version numbers and stuff, when this actually goes out for people to mess with, the version number of the task file is not going to be outdated versus the version number of the app itself. So this is not something that we're going to run into the very first time we run the app, which is why I'm not going to tackle how to recover users' settings and users' tasks. So with that said, we can go to our main component and we can delete this guy right here, standardize all tree view property identifiers, because that is done now. All right, awesome. Let's delete that. All right, and save. Awesome. And let's quit. There we go. Excellent.